Jake Morgan, a college student obsessed with retro games, stumbles upon a strange cartridge at a flea market. The label is worn, with only the faint word Noctis visible. The vendor, an old man with a vacant expression, warns Jake not to play it after midnight. Ignoring the warning, Jake loads the game on his old CRT TV. The game seems like a simple 8-bit horror platformer, but as he progresses, the pixelated world becomes disturbingly familiar. The first level is an exact replica of his apartment. As he moves through the game, objects in his real-life apartment shift subtly, mirroring the changes in the game. A shadowy figure appears in both the game and his peripheral vision. When he tries to turn off the console, the power button doesn't respond. Jake spends the next hour trying everything to turn off the console, but it's as if the game refuses to let go. His heartbeat quickens as the figure moves closer in the game, while in his room, the air grows thick, suffocating. At exactly 12:01 a.m., the game suddenly shuts off on its own, leaving Jake staring at his reflection in the blank TV screen. But his reflection isn't right. It's smiling and he isn't. Strange dreams plague him that night, dreams of pixelated corridors stretching infinitely, of distorted voices whispering his name. When he wakes up, the cartridge is no longer where he left it. It's back in the console, waiting. Jake wakes up to find his TV still on, the game's title screen looping. A new level has been unlocked overnight, one that wasn't there before. The character in the game now bears a striking resemblance to him, down to his clothes and a small scar on his wrist. As he plays, he hears faint whispers from the speakers. The game describes his actions before he even makes them. When he tries to uninstall it, the file reinstalls itself. Disturbed, he searches online for information about Noctis, but no records exist. That night, his dreams are filled with pixelated images and distorted sounds. A message appears on the screen. Keep playing. Jake starts to see the game change in real time. The level design now incorporates aspects from his past. A childhood home, his high school, places he hasn't thought of in years. A familiar voice calls out from the screen, and he realizes it belongs to someone he knew. A friend who died in an accident years ago. His hands shake as he navigates the game, the pixels shifting erratically. Suddenly, his screen flashes, and a single frame of a distorted face appears, something almost human but broken. The power in his apartment flickers. The message says, "You can't stop." More events spiral out of control. The game predicts his future, showing him events before they happen. A knock at the door appears in the game mere seconds before he hears it in reality. Objects in his apartment rearrange themselves to match their placement in the game. His phone screen glitches, showing fragments of his own face merged with the pixelated character. Jake starts to feel the lines between reality and the game blur dangerously, and the more he plays, the harder it becomes to tell what's real. Jake starts seeing glitches in the real world. People's faces blur momentarily, street signs flicker like bad pixels, and his reflection distorts into a blocky figure. Desperate, he contacts a game historian, Mark, who reluctantly agrees to help. Mark tells him that urban legends about Noctis date back to the 1980s. Players who reached a certain level either disappeared or went insane. Mark attempts to analyze the code, but his computer crashes each time he tries to open the files. As Jake plays further, the game reveals his worst fears. Scenes of himself in the hospital, his body twisted into unnatural positions, messages flashing. Is this how it ends? He refuses to continue, but that night, he wakes up with his fingers moving involuntarily, gripping the controller. The game is playing itself, and his in-game character is trapped in a dark corridor, unable to move forward. Then, a new message appears. He is here. Jake feels something in the room with him. He turns sharply but sees nothing, until his screen flickers and a shadow in the game moves, without him pressing a button. The whispers from the TV grow louder, transforming into something akin to static laced with screams. Desperate, he throws the console against the wall, but instead of breaking, it simply reappears back on his desk, powered on. A new option appears on the menu, Last Chance. Jake realizes the game is a conduit for something sinister. The shadowy figure he saw in the game now lurks in his apartment, its distorted, pixelated face flickering between frames of reality. He hears it breathing behind him. Each night, it moves closer. Mark arrives, only to find Jake unresponsive, staring blankly at the screen. The game now has a live feed of Jake's room, displaying Mark standing behind him. Panicked, Mark tries unplugging the console, but the game doesn't shut off. The entity steps forward from the screen, glitching between pixels and reality. The walls of the apartment darken, filled with binary code. Jake screams as the figure reaches for him, and the screen goes black. The TV flickers back on. The game resumes, but Jake is gone. Mark stares at the screen, trembling. The character on screen now has Jake's face. A new message appears. Player 1 has been claimed. Mark turns to leave but finds himself unable to move. The walls around him begin shifting, his surroundings replaced by a pixelated landscape. He realizes he is now inside the game. Mark wakes up in an unfamiliar place, a world rendered in crude, 8-bit graphics. He sees Jake's avatar wandering aimlessly, trapped. A message appears, only one can leave. Mark realizes he's now inside the game, and Jake is gone. The only way out is to win, but the game's levels have changed, morphing into terrifying landscapes filled with pixelated horrors. He fights through glitched-out monsters, searching for a way to escape. Meanwhile, in the real world, Jake's body sits motionless, eyes wide open but lifeless. His computer screen blinks with a new message. Player 2 has entered. The game is still waiting for its next victim. Mark fights through level after level, his heart racing. Every mistake costs him dearly. Pain shoots through his limbs, as if the game punishes failure with real suffering. The final boss approaches, a grotesque fusion of corrupted pixels and screaming faces. Mark must make a choice: sacrifice himself or let Jake remain trapped forever. The screen distorts, and the entity's voice seeps through. A winner must be chosen. Mark hesitates, the reality of his decision crushing him. He tries to call out to Jake, but all he hears is static. With no other choice, he plunges forward into the final battle. The screen fades to black. In the real world, Jake's body finally moves, but when he lifts his head, his eyes glow an unnatural shade of green, the screen reflecting something inhuman. A new game appears on an online auction site, its label barely legible, but 2 words can still be made out: Noctis Lives.